Hi, this video is about the major theories we want to talk about in this class. So this is the way we look at the major theories that throughout history have tried to describe microorganisms. And some of these we still hold on to because they still make sense and they haven't been disproven and they're perfect. And others don't make any sense anymore because we know they're not true. So how did they get disproven historically? That's what we're going to look at. So first, let's introduce the theories. The historical one, the big one that we're going to address really is the theory of spontaneous generation. And generally speaking, this is the idea that life can arise from non-living material. So if you can imagine Frankenstein's monster in that famous story where someone who studied anatomy and physiology enough can eventually learn how to turn a corpse into a living, thinking, breathing thing. That is kind of the pinnacle of spontaneous generation. It's just the idea that you can take something dead and make it alive. This has been thoroughly disproven. This doesn't happen in nature. There's no evidence that it happens in nature, although in the laboratory we can now put together pieces of cells and fire them up. But that is not done easily. Most people don't have the technology to do it, and it never happens in nature, to our knowledge. How do I know that? That's what we're going to get into in a bit. So there's another theory that is related to this, and that theory is a sort of a flavor of the theory of spontaneous generation, and that is miasmatic theory. And this is the idea that corrupting gases can create microorganisms or just infectious disease. So this is kind of, there are different flavors of miasmatic theory, because if people knew of the existence of microorganisms, then they would say that corrupting gases and bad smells would create microorganisms. If they didn't know about microorganisms, they would just say corrupting gases and bad smells cause diseases. And this makes perfect sense, because here are some things that smell bad that do cause disease. Corpses. Corpses are full of bacteria that eat humans. And if you, some of these bacteria are capable of killing a healthy person. And so corpses smell bad because evolutionarily we started to associate corpses with very, very bad things. And so corpses smell terrible, and it's a great thing that they do because we want to stay as far away from them as we can for our own safety. And so historically, people might notice someone who's around corpses all day might get sick and die. And why is that? Well, if you don't know about those bacteria, or you don't know that bacteria exist because microscopes haven't been invented yet, you might think it's the bad smell of the corpses that cause the disease, and that's perfectly reasonable. Here's another thing that smells bad that spreads disease. Feces. Lots of diseases are spread through feces, and feces smells terrible. In this class, we will look at why these things smell the way they do, but it's safe to say that feces is full of bacteria that can make a person sick. And they're also full of bacteria that help you digest your food. There's nothing inherently wrong with feces. It's just, it smells bad, and it belongs in your colon. It does not belong anywhere else. So, yeah, people who work with feces will get lots of different diseases if they're not very careful. And historically, people might have thought the smell of feces is what leads to those diseases. Makes sense to me, unless I'm a microbiologist and I know what I know. Okay, so those are kind of the two ideas that we don't hold anymore, and we're going to look at big experiments that kind of disprove those. Now let's look at some theories that we do hold that have not been disproven. So we do think they are true, and we will until they get disproven, if that ever happens. One is the cell theory. And this has several parts. One, off the top of my head, what I'm remembering is all living things are, wow, I can't type, made of cells. Another part of it is that cells arise from other cells. So no cell is created without a mother cell making it. And then another way of putting it is that cells are the basic unit of life. You can't have any living thing smaller than a cell. And this, I just don't care that much about this part 3 because we're going to look at viruses and virus particles, and we're going to look at prions, and we can sit around and argue about whether they're alive or not. And that tells us more about how we define life than anything else. And to me, that's like great coffee shop philosophy that I couldn't care less about. So instead, let's just pay very close attention to part 2 here. Cells arise from other cells. That's where they come from. That directly contradicts any theory of spontaneous generation. Any theory of spontaneous generation says that cells come from somewhere else, or some force can create a cell out of a non-living thing. Well, we don't believe that anymore. We believe that cells happen when a mother cell divides and makes 2 daughter cells. And then a related, but not directly related theory is the germ theory. And this is the idea that infectious diseases are caused by microorganisms. Yeah. So the germ theory is this idea, and this has been well established. Whenever a new infectious disease is spreading, we go looking to see what's causing it. And we will see the big experiment that convinced people that this is true, and you'll see how we determine what causes a disease eventually. For now, that's enough. These are the 4 theories you need to know. And the complicated one, the cell theory that has all the parts, the only one I care about is this one, cells arise from other cells. Because historically, that is a huge new idea. And with that, I think let's end this video and get some coffee.